My name is Cortney Charleston. I'm a client manager for Multicultural Growth Strategy at the Nielsen Company. Yeah, so my role in particular means working with clients across Nielsen's client base. They could be any company ranging from a manufacturer of CPG items, household items and consumer products that you find in grocery stores and drugstores, to retailers themselves, to media companies. And I work with them in regards to questions about multicultural strategy when they want to make inroads with or engage with consumers who are of Asian ancestry or Hispanic ancestry or Black ancestry. So that's kind of what my day-to-day responsibilities entail. Yeah, so on the client side of things, when it comes to demand, I see a lot of questions and inquiries in regarding to measurement capabilities for growing population segments. So it comes down to being able to measure not only sales at a high level, but get more specific and granular with regards to how it impacts their brand performance. So questions will come from a number of different groups. They might focus on Hispanic or African American or Asian, and it just comes down to understanding what the objective of the brand actually is, to understand what their growth targets are, and to understand where the brand currently sits relative to its competition in terms of resonating with those multicultural consumer segments. With Asian Americans, I think the things that most come to mind are just the fact that growth is most accelerated with that group, and that's growth in terms of spend, that's growth in terms of population, and I think that's starting to capture people's attention. I think it's been a little bit slow getting there because most folks look at something like the census, right, and say, well, Asian Americans only represent 5, 6, 7% of the population. So I think they underestimate the impact that the group can have, though, particularly in an environment where growth for most legacy businesses, brands that have been around for decades, right, particularly in the consumer packaged goods space, growth is flat or +1 or +2% at most for a lot of brands and a lot of companies. And in that type of environment, Asian American is that much more important because it is one of the few reliable sectors of growth that we're seeing in the marketplace. Yeah, so growth, when I speak of growth, what I'm really referring to is how much new money or new consumption or new demand is entering the consumer marketplace, right? So when I look at growth, I'm looking for, increase in revenue for businesses year over year. I'm looking to see if the growth is widespread across a number of different categories and industries. And that's really an area where I'm seeing Asian growth be particularly pronounced. It's kind of a market truism, I think, right now that Asian Americans are contributing growth to a number of different areas, such as, it can be anything from obviously food, right? When we think about just people's basic needs, food, household items, things like that. But I also think Asian Americans have a particularly strong influence when it comes to technology and the amount of money that they're willing to spend, particularly on new technologies. So when things are entering the marketplace for the first time, a lot of the earliest adopters are Asian American. And that's extremely important because from a revenue standpoint or a business standpoint, those are bigger ticket purchases, right? So, you're talking about more money actually being exchanged from consumer to retailer or to brand, right? But likewise, it's important because of influencing potential and thinking about how technology allows Asian Americans to connect with each other and connect with other people outside of that community in order to make an impact in terms of what people are watching, what they're buying, and what they express preference for. I think one thing that marketers have to keep in mind is when we say Asian Americans, right? S means plural, and this is a segment that is obviously not monolithic. It's very diverse. You're dealing with a cohort of people who come from any number of different countries that speak any number of different languages, that have different norms, customs, and cultures. And so therefore, if you're talking about the segment as a whole, you can obviously talk at a high level because I know organizations require scale and no one's going to discount that, but you're also dealing with a group of population where a one-size-fits-all strategy won't work. And I think that's the most important takeaway I would express to marketers in any area. Well, I think the first thing that I would communicate to marketers who are interested in engaging the population is that Number one, just recognize that it's a segment that's already providing growth, right? So I think one of the key components of the conversation around multicultural marketing in general is that growth is coming, and not growth is here, here, here. And I think that shift is really important because it necessitates action in the short term, and it's not something that we can just have the liberty of saying, you know what, in 5 years we'll really have our act together and then we'll be good. I think it requires investment now, and if you want to have that growth in 5 years, if you want to benefit from it, it requires you actually putting in the groundwork now while the stakes are comparatively lower. You know what I mean? Like, comparatively speaking, you know, the impact on your business will be greater later. So if I'm you, I would try to get in front of it. I'm talking about doing primary research to understand, does your brand resonate with Asian American consumers? I'm talking about knowing where they live, knowing where they shop, knowing what they like, what are their product preferences, are they familiar with your brand? Are they familiar with even the category of items that you compete in? Maybe in their lifestyle, those things just aren't as important, right? You have to know these things before you can start talking to someone because, you know, if you don't kind of do that groundwork up front, that homework, any communication that you have is going to fall short because you're missing a key step of introducing yourself to the consumer.